Husband throws cake at black wife for not paying the bill, but her next move shocked everyone. James and Monique had been married for a few years, and like many couples, their life together had moments of joy and moments of tension. James was proud of his career. He had just received a promotion at work, and he was excited to celebrate his achievement. He wanted this day to be perfect, a moment that showed how far he had come and how much he could provide for his wife. Monique, on the other hand, had her own opinions about life and money. She was independent, strong-willed, and confident in her own choices. While she appreciated James's hard work, she did not believe that he needed to control every situation, especially when it came to finances. The couple decided to celebrate at a local cafe that had recently become popular for its desserts and cozy atmosphere. The cafe was filled with laughter, chatter, and the pleasant aroma of freshly baked goods. Outside, the sun shone warmly, and the streets were busy with people enjoying their afternoon. Inside, the cafe had a mixture of soft music and the gentle hum of conversations. It was the kind of place that made you feel comfortable and welcome, the kind of place that seemed perfect for a quiet celebration. James arrived a few minutes earlier than Monique. He had reserved a small table near the window, where the sunlight poured in and reflected off the polished wooden floors. He wanted everything to be perfect: the setting, the food, and even the way the sunlight fell on the table. When Monique entered the cafe, she smiled, appreciating the thought James had put into the plan. She wore a simple but elegant dress, and her presence seemed to brighten the entire room. James stood up, greeted her with a hug, and they both took their seats. From the start, there was a subtle tension in the air. James had been hinting all week that he wanted to pay for everything that day. He believed it was his responsibility as a husband and as the person who had just earned the promotion. Monique, however, felt differently. She believed that marriage was a partnership, that both partners should contribute and make decisions together. She suggested splitting the bill, thinking it was a reasonable approach, but James immediately dismissed her suggestion. "No, today is about me," he said with a proud smile. "I worked hard, and I want to celebrate with you." Monique nodded politely, not wanting to start an argument in public, but inside, she felt her independence and voice being ignored. Their conversation continued, light at first, about James's work and Monique's recent projects. Monique had been busy with her own career and personal goals, and she shared stories of small victories and challenges she had faced. James listened, but his focus seemed divided. He kept looking at the menu, occasionally glancing at the entrance, making sure no one was disturbing their celebration. Monique noticed the subtle signs of control, the way he made decisions without asking for her input, and she felt a quiet frustration building inside her. She knew that this celebration should be about both of them, but it was slowly becoming more about James than about their relationship. When the waiter came to take their order, James insisted on ordering first. He chose a variety of dishes and, of course, insisted on the most expensive options. Monique tried to suggest a few simpler choices, ones that both of them could enjoy without making a show of spending too much money, but James brushed off her suggestions. "It's a celebration," he said firmly. "Don't worry about it." Monique felt torn. On one hand, she wanted to make James happy and celebrate his success. On the other hand, she felt uncomfortable with the way he was controlling everything, from the seating to the menu. She decided to let it go for now, thinking that perhaps James's excitement would pass and they could enjoy the meal together. As they waited for their food, James and Monique tried to engage in light conversation. They talked about their plans for the weekend, shared jokes, and laughed at small, everyday things. But beneath the laughter, there was an unspoken tension. Monique could sense that James's mood was fragile. He wanted the day to be perfect, and any deviation from his plan seemed to unsettle him. She remembered moments from their past, small incidents where disagreements over money or decisions had caused arguments. She hoped this day would be different, but a quiet worry lingered in her mind. When the food arrived, it was presented beautifully. The plates were filled with colors and textures that made the meal seem almost like art. James took the first bite with satisfaction, and Monique followed. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the tension had faded, replaced by the simple pleasure of enjoying a good meal. They smiled at each other, and Monique felt a sense of hope that perhaps this day could be different, that perhaps they could celebrate together without conflict. Then, as they finished their main courses, the waiter returned with a cake. It was a special order, a rich chocolate cake decorated with fresh fruits and delicate icing. James had chosen it himself, thinking it was the perfect way to mark his promotion. He placed it in front of Monique with a proud smile, expecting her to admire it and acknowledge his gesture. Monique, however, noticed the underlying expectation in his expression. It was as if he wanted her approval, her gratitude, and her submission all at once. She felt a mix of emotions: annoyance, disappointment, and a quiet determination to stand her ground. James began talking about the cake, how he had spent time choosing it and how it symbolized his hard work. He then brought up the topic of the bill again. "You know, I'm paying for everything today," he said. "It's only right. I earned this, and I want to treat you." Monique listened, then calmly replied, "James, I appreciate it, but I want to contribute. I think we should split the bill." The words were simple, polite, but they carried a weight that James was not expecting. His pride flared, and a subtle anger began to show on his face. The atmosphere in the cafe began to change. Other customers noticed the tension at their table. Friends who had come along sensed that something serious was about to happen. Monique remained calm, aware of the growing tension but determined not to escalate it. She had always believed in standing up for herself with dignity, and she was not willing to compromise her principles, even in a public setting. James, however, seemed unable to accept her position. His idea of celebration, of showing his love, was being challenged, and he did not know how to respond. As the waiter left to give them a few moments, James and Monique sat in silence for a brief moment. The sunlight streaming through the window illuminated their faces, highlighting the emotions that words alone could not express. Monique took a deep breath, steadying herself for the conversation she knew was coming. She wanted to remain composed, to show strength without aggression. James, meanwhile, fidgeted slightly, his pride and frustration evident in the tightening of his jaw and the sharpness in his eyes. This was the beginning of a turning point. What had started as a simple celebration of a career achievement was slowly becoming a test of patience, respect, and understanding. Monique's calm and rational approach contrasted sharply with James's growing agitation. Friends at the table exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what might happen next. The cafe, once filled with light laughter and chatter, now held a quiet tension, a silent anticipation that something significant was about to occur. Monique thought about her own values and the life she wanted to lead. She believed in equality, mutual respect, and communication in a relationship. She also knew that standing up for herself might cause conflict, but she felt it was necessary. James's insistence on controlling the situation, on making the celebration solely about him, was a challenge to her principles. She realized that this moment, seemingly small, was an important test of character for both of them. As the cake sat in front of them, untouched for a moment, Monique prepared herself. She knew that what happened next could change the course of the day, their relationship, and perhaps even her own sense of self. She remained calm, collected, and aware of the eyes around them, knowing that dignity and composure were her allies. James, unaware of the strength of Monique's resolve, prepared to react according to his own impulses. The cafe, filled with the aroma of coffee, pastries, and laughter from other tables, became a stage for a moment that would soon be remembered by everyone present. What seemed like a simple celebration had turned into a silent drama, with emotions, pride, and values all intertwined. Monique's quiet strength contrasted with James's visible frustration, setting the stage for an event that no one could have anticipated. And so, the day that began with excitement, pride, and joy slowly approached a critical moment. Monique and James, sitting across from each other, represented more than just a couple at a cafe. They symbolized the challenges that can exist in relationships when pride, independence, and expectations collide. The sunlight continued to stream through the windows, highlighting their faces, as they prepared for the next turn in a story that was far from over. The moment the cake was placed on the table, it looked like a piece of art. The chocolate frosting glistened under the soft cafe lights, and fresh fruits added color and freshness. The cake had been carefully chosen by James, and he seemed proud of his selection. He smiled at Monique, expecting her to admire it, to express her gratitude, and perhaps to acknowledge that this day was all about his achievement. Monique, however, was thinking differently. She admired the cake, yes, but she was also aware that this was a moment testing more than just her taste buds. It was a moment testing patience, respect, and boundaries. James began to talk, his voice filled with pride and excitement. "I picked this cake because it's perfect for today," he said. "It's rich, beautiful, and celebratory. Just like this promotion." He looked at Monique, expecting her to smile and thank him. But Monique simply nodded, acknowledging the cake without giving the praise he seemed to expect. She knew he wanted approval, but she did not want to surrender her voice or her independence. She was tired of being controlled and overlooked, even in small ways. Then, as if rehearsed, James brought up the subject of the bill again. He leaned slightly forward, his eyes fixed on Monique. "You know, I'm paying for everything today," he said firmly. "It's the right thing to do. I worked hard, and I want to treat you. That's how a husband should behave." Monique took a slow breath and calmly responded, "James, I appreciate your hard work and your gesture, but I want to contribute. I think we should split the bill." Those simple words, polite but firm, had an immediate effect. James's smile faltered, and a flash of irritation crossed his face. He was not used to being challenged in public, especially not by Monique, whom he loved but often saw through the lens of control and expectation. His pride, built over years of hard work and personal standards, could not easily accept the idea that she did not need him to manage everything. He felt cornered, frustrated, and suddenly defensive. A few nearby customers noticed the tension. They glanced at the couple, sensing that this was not just a casual disagreement. Monique's calm composure contrasted sharply with James's rising agitation. While she maintained a polite smile, he began gesturing slightly, moving his hands as if to emphasize his point. "I don't understand," he said. "I just want to celebrate this day with you. Why does it matter if I pay? Isn't this supposed to be about happiness?" Monique remained calm, even as the pressure built. She knew that escalating the argument would only give him more reason to dominate the situation. She wanted to assert her independence, not provoke anger. "Happiness isn't about who pays, James," she replied softly. "It's about respect, communication, and understanding. A celebration should be about both of us, not just about what you can provide." James's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, he seemed taken aback. He had expected resistance in small doses, but not this calm yet firm response in public. He shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. Monique continued to speak, her voice steady. "I love you, James, but I cannot accept being treated in a way that feels controlling. I need us to be equals in our decisions, even in small things like this." The cafe, which had been filled with the soft hum of conversations, seemed to hold its breath. Friends at the table exchanged nervous glances. A few other customers leaned slightly closer, curious but cautious. Everyone could sense that something important was unfolding. It was not just an argument about money, it was a moment of principle, a test of character and respect. James's pride and frustration grew. He wanted to maintain control, but Monique's calm assertiveness was like a mirror reflecting his own behavior. He fidgeted, his jaw tightening slightly, and his hands clenched into loose fists. "I just don't understand why you have to make this complicated," he said, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. "I'm trying to do something nice for us. Why is that not enough?" Monique leaned back slightly, keeping her composure. "Doing something nice is not just about spending money or controlling every detail," she explained. "It's about showing care, listening, and respecting each other's feelings. I feel disrespected when my opinions are ignored, even in small matters. Today, I want to feel like an equal partner, not someone being managed." James's face darkened, a mixture of anger and embarrassment. He looked around the cafe, noticing that a few people were now openly watching their table. He felt exposed, his private disagreement suddenly on display. The pressure of being observed intensified his frustration. In a sudden, impulsive move, driven by his emotions and inability to handle the situation calmly, James grabbed the cake in front of him. Time seemed to slow for Monique. Before she could react, James flung the cake toward her. The chocolate, icing, and fruit splattered across her dress, her hair, and her face. Gasps filled the cafe. People turned in shock, unsure whether to intervene. The soft music and the chatter of the cafe were drowned out by the sound of splattering cake hitting the table and floor. Monique sat frozen for a moment, stunned. She felt the shock and humiliation of being attacked in a public place, yet a part of her mind remained aware of the need to respond thoughtfully. Her friends, sitting nearby, jumped up immediately. "James! What are you doing?" one of them shouted. But Monique raised a hand, signaling them to stay calm. She understood that reacting with anger or violence could escalate the situation further. Instead, she focused on steadying herself, taking deep breaths, and assessing the moment. She had faced challenges before, but this was unprecedented in its humiliation. Yet, she refused to let the public nature of the incident define her response. Monique carefully wiped the cake from her face, not in panic but with a deliberate calmness. She looked directly at James, who now seemed slightly shocked himself. His anger had made him act impulsively, and seeing the consequences, he was unsure how to respond. Monique's composed reaction created a sharp contrast to his impulsive aggression. The other customers continued to stare, some whispering, others silently observing, but Monique's dignity remained intact. She took a deep breath and spoke, her voice clear and steady. "James, what you just did is not acceptable," she said. "Throwing a cake at me is humiliating and disrespectful. I will not tolerate this behavior. We can have disagreements, we can discuss money, and we can make decisions together, but violence, even something that seems small like this, crosses a line." James's anger seemed to fade slightly, replaced by confusion. He had not expected her to respond calmly and assertively. He opened his mouth to speak but found himself at a loss. Monique's words were not accusations, they were statements of principle, boundary setting, and dignity. She was not retaliating, not humiliating him in return, she was simply standing firm in her values. The cafe remained silent for a moment. Other patrons began to nod subtly, showing quiet support for Monique. Her friends looked at her with admiration and relief, glad that she was handling the situation with strength and composure. James, meanwhile, looked down at the remnants of the cake on the floor and on Monique's dress. He seemed to realize, slowly, the impact of his actions, not just on her, but on how others were perceiving him. Monique continued, speaking firmly but without anger. "I hope you understand that a relationship built on respect and equality is far stronger than one built on control or pride. I am willing to work through challenges, but only if there is mutual respect. Today, you chose to act in a way that shows a lack of respect, and that is not acceptable to me." James remained silent, his hands nervously fidgeting with the napkin on the table. The embarrassment, the shock, and the realization of his impulsive behavior seemed to weigh on him. Monique, sensing that further argument could escalate, chose to stand. She stood tall, brushing off the remaining cake gently from her dress, and looked around at the cafe. Her posture, calm and confident, conveyed strength without aggression. The cafe patrons, once mere observers, now seemed to respect her. Whispers of admiration filled the room quietly. Monique had turned a moment of humiliation into a display of composure, dignity, and self-respect. She did not shout, she did not retaliate, and she did not beg for apologies. Instead, she stood firm in her principles, showing everyone, including James, that courage and calmness could turn a shocking moment into a lesson in respect. Monique stood in the middle of the cafe, her dress slightly stained with cake, her hair tousled, and her face bearing the remnants of chocolate and cream. She could feel the eyes of everyone around her, some filled with shock, some with curiosity, and others with silent support. Yet, despite the attention, she remained calm. This was a moment that could have easily spiraled out of control, but she refused to let anger or embarrassment dictate her actions. Instead, she focused on clarity, dignity, and taking control of the situation in a way that would set a precedent not only for James but for herself. James, still seated, looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and confusion. His hand twitched slightly, almost as if he wanted to speak, to apologize, or perhaps to justify his behavior. But Monique did not give him that opportunity immediately. She took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying her voice and her presence. She wanted to communicate clearly, not react impulsively. She wanted James to understand the impact of his actions and to realize that respect, not control, was the foundation of any relationship. "You need to understand something," Monique began, her voice calm but firm. "What just happened is not a joke. What just happened is not acceptable. Throwing a cake at someone, even in anger, is humiliating, disrespectful, and completely wrong." Her gaze met his directly, not with hostility, but with the strength of conviction. "This isn't about money, about a cake, or even about who pays the bill. This is about respect, about dignity, and about the way we treat each other as equals." James opened his mouth to respond, but Monique raised a hand, gently stopping him. She did not want to argue or be interrupted. She wanted her words to be heard fully, clearly, and without distraction. "I love you, James. I care about you. But love is not just about celebrating promotions or enjoying cakes. Love is about treating each other with respect. It is about listening, understanding, and valuing each other's opinions. It is not about asserting dominance or proving a point through anger." The cafe had gone completely silent. The usual hum of conversations, the clinking of cups, and the soft music seemed to fade into the background. All eyes were on Monique, witnessing a woman who had just been humiliated in public yet remained composed, articulate, and powerful. Some customers whispered among themselves, nodding in quiet approval. A few even leaned forward, perhaps hoping to see how James would react next. Friends at the table looked at Monique with admiration and relief, silently applauding her courage and self-control. Monique continued, choosing her words carefully. "I understand that you are proud of your achievements, and I am proud of you too. But pride should never lead to disrespect. Today, your actions crossed a line. And while I could react with anger or retaliation, I choose not to. I choose to act with dignity, to stand for myself, and to remind you that relationships are built on equality, respect, and mutual understanding." Her words hung in the air like a gentle but unyielding force. James's anger seemed to falter, replaced by a flicker of guilt and embarrassment. He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with the napkin on the table, unsure how to respond. He had expected resistance, perhaps even an argument, but he had not expected calm, firm, and reasoned words delivered in public. Monique's response disrupted his usual patterns, leaving him momentarily powerless and speechless. Monique knew that this was a turning point. She understood that allowing James to dominate the situation would only encourage similar behavior in the future. But instead of escalating the conflict or humiliating him further, she decided to take a path that was both surprising and powerful. She took a step back, creating physical space between them, and then calmly said, "I am going to leave now." The words were simple, but the impact was profound. James looked up, eyes widening in shock. "Leave? Here? Now?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Monique nodded gently. "Yes, James. I am leaving. I will not stay in a place where I am disrespected. I will not tolerate behavior that humiliates me, no matter what the circumstances. I need to protect myself and maintain my dignity." Some customers gasped softly, while others nodded silently in approval. Monique's friends looked at her in surprise, but also with deep respect. They had expected a confrontation, perhaps an argument, or even tears, but not this calm, decisive, and self-respecting move. Monique gathered her purse, straightened her dress, and moved toward the exit with poise and confidence. Every step she took radiated a quiet strength, a refusal to be belittled or controlled. James, still seated, seemed frozen. He had never seen Monique act this way. He had expected submission, an apology, or at least some hesitation. But she was resolute, and that resoluteness shocked him. He opened his mouth to call after her, to stop her, but the words never came. Monique's presence, calm yet commanding, had shifted the dynamic completely. In that moment, she held the power not through anger or confrontation, but through self-respect and clarity. Outside the cafe, Monique took a deep breath of fresh air. The sunlight felt warm on her face, and the sounds of the city people walking, cars passing, distant laughter were a stark contrast to the tense silence inside the cafe. She felt a mix of emotions, shock at what had just happened, relief that she had maintained her composure, and empowerment from taking a decisive stand. She knew that walking away was not an act of defeat, it was an act of courage and self-preservation. Monique did not rush. She took slow, measured steps, allowing herself a moment to process the situation. She thought about the years she had spent trying to maintain harmony, often at the expense of her own comfort and voice. She realized that asserting herself in a calm and dignified way was far more powerful than reacting with anger or humiliation. She felt a sense of pride, not just for standing up to James, but for reclaiming her own sense of agency. Once a short distance from the cafe, she stopped and sent a quick message to her close friends, informing them of what had happened. She wanted their support and advice, not because she felt helpless, but because she valued the perspective and encouragement of people who cared about her well-being. Within minutes, messages of concern and admiration started pouring in. Friends expressed shock, but also pride in the way she had handled the situation. Some even suggested that she consider sharing the incident more broadly, as it could inspire others to assert themselves in difficult situations. Monique, meanwhile, returned to her car, still calm and collected. She reflected on the power of maintaining composure under pressure. She realized that many people faced challenges where emotions could easily take control, leading to actions they might later regret. By staying calm, she had not only preserved her dignity but also created a moment that would teach James an important lesson about respect, boundaries, and equality. Back in the cafe, James was left to face the consequences of his actions. He looked around at the curious and sympathetic faces of the customers and realized that his behavior had been witnessed and judged. The embarrassment was immediate and palpable. His pride had been challenged publicly, and he had no easy way to regain the control he sought. Monique's departure left him alone with his thoughts, forcing him to reflect on his actions in a way he had not anticipated. Monique, on the other hand, felt a sense of liberation. She knew that standing up for herself, even in a public and potentially humiliating situation, was a step toward greater independence and self-respect. She had shown that courage does not always mean confrontation. Sometimes, it means walking away, staying composed, and refusing to tolerate disrespect. Her calm and firm response had turned a shocking moment into a powerful statement about dignity, equality, and self-worth. By the time Monique reached home, she was already thinking ahead. She knew that this incident would require careful consideration and perhaps further conversations with James, but for now, she focused on processing her emotions, regaining her sense of peace, and planning her next steps. She had learned that asserting herself did not mean being unkind or reactive, it meant being deliberate, calm, and confident in her values. Even as the day ended, Monique could not ignore the lasting impact of her actions. She had shocked James, impressed her friends, and made a statement to everyone who had witnessed the event. More importantly, she had reminded herself that her dignity and self-respect were not negotiable. She had turned an incident that could have caused humiliation into a moment of empowerment, strength, and clarity. After leaving the cafe, Monique felt a mixture of relief, empowerment, and clarity. The immediate shock of James throwing the cake was behind her, and what remained was a sense of purpose. She knew that the incident could have crushed her confidence, but instead, she chose to transform it into a moment of strength. Each step she took away from the cafe symbolized her reclaiming control over her life and her choices. The sunlight felt warmer, the air fresher, and even the sounds of the city seemed to encourage her forward. It was as if the universe had given her a moment to reflect, reset, and move with dignity. Monique did not rush to act impulsively. She sat in her car for a few minutes, taking deep breaths and collecting her thoughts. She reflected on the events of the cafe, thinking about the importance of setting boundaries in relationships. She realized that many people, both men and women, often tolerate disrespect because they fear conflict or judgment. She did not want to be one of those people. Standing firm, maintaining composure, and asserting her values had been difficult, but it had also been liberating. Monique understood that real strength often comes in moments of calm, not in angry reactions. Her first action was to contact her closest friends and family. She sent a message explaining what had happened, recounting the incident with honesty and clarity. She did not embellish or dramatize the story, she simply shared the truth. Within minutes, her phone began buzzing with supportive messages. Friends expressed shock at what had happened but also admiration for the way Monique had handled the situation. They reassured her that her reaction was the right one, that she had shown courage, and that she had acted with dignity under immense pressure. Monique felt gratitude for their support. Their encouragement reinforced the understanding that she had acted not only for herself but also as an example of strength and self-respect. The next step Monique took was to consider the wider impact of the incident. She realized that many people could learn from her response, especially the idea that humiliation, whether public or private, does not require a reaction fueled by anger or revenge. Instead, responding with composure and principle can change the narrative entirely. She decided to share her experience on social media, writing about the importance of boundaries, respect, and dignity in relationships. Monique emphasized that no one should accept humiliation as a normal part of love or marriage and that self-respect is a non-negotiable value. The response was overwhelming. Her post quickly gained attention, with people commenting, sharing, and expressing admiration. Many shared similar experiences, expressing relief that Monique had demonstrated a healthy and empowering way to handle conflict. Some people thanked her for speaking out, noting that her composure was inspiring. Monique was heartened by the overwhelming support. She realized that turning a negative, shocking incident into a lesson of courage and self-worth could impact not only her life but also the lives of countless others. Meanwhile, James was left to reflect on the consequences of his actions. News of the cafe incident spread quickly among friends and acquaintances, and even strangers who had witnessed the event shared their impressions online. The embarrassment he felt was compounded by the realization that his behavior had been witnessed and judged publicly. He began to understand, perhaps for the first time, that impulsive actions driven by pride and anger could have long-lasting consequences. While he initially felt defensive, the calm and dignified manner in which Monique handled the situation forced him to confront his own behavior honestly. Monique, aware of this, chose not to escalate the conflict further. She understood that retaliation or humiliation would only reinforce negative cycles. Instead, she focused on her personal growth, planning constructive ways to move forward. She enrolled in a course she had been interested in for a long time, something that would enhance her skills and boost her independence. She reconnected with friends she had lost touch with and devoted time to hobbies and activities that brought her joy. By focusing on positive actions, she channeled her energy into building a life that reflected her values and ambitions. During this time, Monique also began reflecting on her relationship with James. She realized that trust, respect, and equality were essential foundations that could not be compromised. While she still cared for him, she understood that any attempt to repair their relationship would require him to genuinely acknowledge his mistakes and commit to change. Monique resolved that she would not compromise her dignity or self-worth for the sake of reconciliation. Any future interactions would be based on mutual respect, honesty, and accountability. Monique's story continued to inspire people. Social media posts, messages from friends, and even news articles highlighted the courage and composure she had shown. Many people expressed that her actions were a powerful example of how to respond to disrespect without resorting to anger or humiliation. Monique found herself receiving messages from strangers thanking her for demonstrating that dignity and courage are powerful tools. She realized that her experience, while deeply personal, had the potential to create a broader conversation about respect, equality, and self-worth in relationships. As time passed, Monique began to feel more confident in her choices. The initial shock of the cafe incident had given way to a sense of empowerment. She felt proud not just for standing up to James, but for turning a moment of humiliation into a public lesson of strength and self-respect. She reflected on the power of calmness, clarity, and assertiveness, realizing that these qualities could transform difficult situations into opportunities for growth and positive change. Monique also focused on her emotional well-being. She practiced mindfulness and reflection, ensuring that the incident did not leave lingering resentment or anger. By processing her emotions in a healthy and constructive way, she strengthened her resilience and mental clarity. She understood that personal growth is not just about reacting to challenges, but about using experiences to build a stronger, more confident self. James, on the other hand, faced a period of self-reflection. Friends and acquaintances who had witnessed the incident or heard about it began questioning his behavior. He felt the weight of public scrutiny and realized that his actions had far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate moment. James began to understand that controlling behavior and impulsive anger were damaging, not only to Monique but also to his own sense of integrity and credibility. The embarrassment and reflection prompted him to consider seeking guidance or counseling to better manage his emotions and behaviors. Meanwhile, Monique's daily life began to regain normalcy, but with a new sense of awareness and empowerment. She returned to work, focusing on her career goals with renewed energy. She spent time with friends and family, strengthening relationships that supported her well-being and personal growth. Every interaction, every decision, was guided by her renewed understanding of self-respect and the importance of maintaining dignity in all circumstances. Monique also used her experience to educate others. Through conversations, social media posts, and discussions with friends, she highlighted the importance of setting boundaries in relationships, asserting oneself calmly, and responding to disrespect with dignity. She emphasized that courage is not always loud or aggressive, it can be quiet, measured, and effective. Her story encouraged others to recognize their own value and to avoid tolerating behavior that undermines their self-worth. The aftermath of the cafe incident also strengthened Monique's sense of independence. She began making decisions more confidently, knowing that her voice mattered and that standing up for herself was not an act of defiance, but an act of self-respect. She took pride in her ability to handle the situation with calmness, assertiveness, and dignity. Her confidence grew, and with it, her ability to navigate challenges without fear or hesitation. In the weeks that followed, Monique's story continued to circulate online and among her social circles. People admired her courage, and many reached out to share their own experiences, seeking guidance and support. Monique became a symbol of resilience and dignity, demonstrating that it is possible to confront disrespect in a way that is firm, principled, and empowering. Her story resonated with many, sparking conversations about respect, equality, and the importance of self-worth in personal relationships. Through it all, Monique remained humble. She did not seek attention or praise for her actions. Instead, she focused on living her life with integrity, using her experience to educate and inspire others. She understood that true strength lies not in retaliation or public confrontation, but in the ability to maintain composure, assert one's boundaries, and act with dignity even in the face of humiliation. By the end of this chapter in her life, Monique had achieved a sense of clarity and empowerment that few people experience after such a shocking event. She had turned a moment of public humiliation into a lesson of courage, self-respect, and dignity. She had inspired others, strengthened her independence, and begun the process of rebuilding her life on her own terms. Monique's actions had demonstrated that even in the most difficult circumstances, it is possible to respond with grace, strength, and unwavering self-respect. In the weeks following the cafe incident, Monique's life began to take a new shape. What had initially felt like a moment of embarrassment and shock gradually transformed into a turning point, a moment that defined her strength, independence, and self-respect. She realized that life does not always go as planned, and that people sometimes act in ways that are hurtful or unfair. But she also understood that how one responds to such moments can change the entire narrative. Monique had chosen a path of dignity, composure, and empowerment, and now she was ready to continue building her life on those principles. Her daily routine became a source of confidence and purpose. Monique returned to her work with renewed energy, focusing on projects she had once set aside. She approached her career with determination, using her skills and talents to achieve goals she had always dreamed of reaching. Every small success reinforced the idea that she could thrive independently, that her worth was not defined by someone else's approval or control. The cafe incident, which had once seemed like a personal crisis, became a lesson in resilience and the power of self-belief. Monique also devoted more time to her personal growth. She enrolled in courses she had long wanted to take, learning new skills and expanding her knowledge. She reconnected with friends she had drifted away from, forming stronger bonds with people who valued respect, support, and mutual understanding. She also dedicated time to hobbies and activities that brought her joy, from writing in her journal to exploring nature and practicing mindfulness. Each day became an opportunity to reinforce her independence and confidence. James, on the other hand, experienced a very different journey. The embarrassment he had faced in the cafe, combined with the public attention Monique's story had received, forced him to reflect deeply on his behavior. He realized that his actions, driven by pride and a need for control, had been harmful not only to Monique but also to his own sense of integrity. He began to understand that true love and respect in a relationship do not come from dominance or displays of power, but from listening, understanding, and valuing one another as equals. Despite his reflections, Monique was cautious. She knew that reconciliation, if it were ever possible, would require genuine change and consistent respect. She was not willing to compromise her dignity or self-worth for the sake of returning to the status quo. She remained open to dialogue, but only if James demonstrated accountability, empathy, and a commitment to equality in their relationship. This mindset gave her a sense of control and peace, allowing her to approach the situation with clarity rather than emotion-driven decisions. As news of the cafe incident spread, Monique continued to receive messages from people inspired by her actions. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers expressed admiration for the calm, principled way she had handled humiliation. Many shared similar experiences, often involving moments of disrespect or imbalance in relationships, and thanked her for showing that strength does not always require aggression or revenge. Monique realized that her story had resonated far beyond her immediate circle, becoming a source of encouragement and empowerment for others facing similar challenges. Monique also used this period to reflect on the deeper lessons of the experience. She recognized the importance of boundaries in all aspects of life, not just in relationships. By asserting herself calmly and firmly, she had protected her self-respect while demonstrating strength and composure. She understood that setting limits is not a sign of weakness or defiance, but a fundamental act of self-care. Monique's reflection extended to her career, friendships, and personal pursuits, guiding her to live in alignment with her values. In her personal life, Monique began to notice subtle changes in her interactions with others. She spoke more confidently, expressed her opinions without fear of judgment, and maintained her composure in challenging situations. People responded positively to her confidence and clarity, often seeking her advice or perspective. Her experiences had strengthened her empathy as well. She could now understand the struggles of others who faced disrespect or humiliation, offering support and guidance based on her own journey. Meanwhile, James began taking steps toward self-improvement. He sought counseling to understand his behavior, learning techniques to manage anger, pride, and the desire for control. He reflected on the importance of mutual respect and equality, realizing that these values are crucial for maintaining a healthy and loving relationship. While he could not undo the past, he committed to personal growth, hoping to become a better partner and a more self-aware individual. Monique, while observing these changes from a distance, remained cautious but hopeful. She understood that personal growth is a continuous process and that meaningful change requires consistent effort. Her focus, however, remained on herself, her happiness, her goals, and her sense of empowerment. She was determined not to let past events dictate her future or compromise the confidence she had worked so hard to rebuild. As time went on, Monique found herself thriving in ways she had never imagined. She achieved milestones in her career, strengthened her friendships, and cultivated a sense of self-assurance that extended to all areas of her life. The incident at the cafe, once a source of humiliation, had become a catalyst for transformation. Monique realized that difficult moments, when handled with composure and clarity, can lead to personal growth, resilience, and a deeper understanding of oneself. Monique's story also began to inspire broader conversations about respect, equality, and self-worth in relationships. Friends shared her story with their networks, online platforms highlighted her courage, and discussions emerged about how to handle situations involving disrespect or imbalance. Monique had unintentionally become a symbol of strength and dignity, showing that standing up for oneself with calmness and composure can create a lasting impact. Through all of this, Monique maintained her humility. She did not seek recognition or praise for her actions. Instead, she focused on living her life with integrity, making decisions based on her values, and using her experiences to guide others. She understood that true empowerment comes from within and that external validation, while encouraging, is secondary to self-respect and personal growth. Monique's relationship with James evolved slowly. They maintained communication, but it was measured and intentional. James demonstrated changes in his behavior, showing respect for boundaries, listening actively, and acknowledging past mistakes. While the relationship was not immediately restored to its previous state, there was a foundation for potential reconciliation built on accountability and mutual respect. Monique remained cautious but open to possibilities, ensuring that any future interactions would align with her values and sense of dignity. Ultimately, Monique emerged from the experience stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. She had faced a moment of public humiliation and shock but had responded with composure, dignity, and principle. Her actions had inspired others, strengthened her personal growth, and created a foundation for a future defined by empowerment and self-respect. She realized that challenges, no matter how difficult, can become opportunities for transformation when approached with courage, clarity, and confidence. Monique's journey also highlighted the importance of support networks. Friends and family had played a crucial role in affirming her choices and providing guidance. Their encouragement reinforced the idea that personal strength is amplified when shared with others who care and support your well-being. Monique became a source of support for others in turn, offering advice, empathy, and encouragement based on her own experiences. In the end, Monique's story was not just about a single incident at a cafe, it was about resilience, empowerment, and the ability to transform adversity into opportunity. She had demonstrated that self-respect and composure are powerful tools in navigating life's challenges. By standing firm in her values, asserting boundaries, and responding with dignity, she had taken control of her narrative and inspired others to do the same. Monique's life continued to flourish. She pursued her goals with determination, nurtured meaningful relationships, and maintained a sense of self-respect that guided her every decision. The incident at the cafe remained a memorable moment, not because of the shock or humiliation, but because of the strength, clarity, and courage it revealed. Monique had turned a challenging experience into a transformative journey, leaving a lasting impact on herself and those who witnessed or learned about her story. Her journey served as a powerful reminder that true strength lies in the ability to remain calm, composed, and principled, even in moments of shock or adversity. Monique's life became a testament to the power of dignity, self-respect, and courage, showing that one can emerge from even the most difficult situations stronger, wiser, and more empowered than ever before.